So this is going to be the last video in the series of Bebop scale videos that I've been posting over the last couple of months. This video is just going to be talking about how to incorporate some linear concepts into the context of the Bebop scale. So in the first video we talked about the major Bebop scale and some of the concepts that I like to use with that scale sound. In the second video we talked about the dominant Bebop scale and the Phrygian dominant Bebop scale and some of those applications over different chord changes and that kind of thing. So today we're going to be taking a long eighth note line and breaking it up into smaller pieces and seeing how we can be a little bit more flexible with it and incorporate some of these concepts into our playing. Here's the full line. So a long eighth note phrase like that is something you might come across in a solo transcription. You know, if you're listening to a lot of people kind of in like the bebop idiom or hard bop idiom, a lot of times they're going to be playing long eighth note phrases that go across, you know, 3 or 4 measures at a time. But in this line, we're going to focus on just kind of the individual pieces that make up the longer phrase. So in our first measure, we have 2 pieces that we're going to take a look at. The first piece is going to be this idea, and then the second piece will be this. So that first piece is really just kind of a chromatic approach with some rhythmic variation added to it. So the rhythmic variation is an eighth note triplet, and the chromatic approach is just kind of filling in the distance of a minor third with chromatic notes. It's really helpful to have chromatic ideas like this and just kind of melodic devices like this that have like rhythm built into them, because it kind of gives you one less thing to think about when you're improvising. With this shape, we're going to find all of the different places where we have a minor third distance within this G dominant bebop scale that this line will belong to. So you have that distance between the 6th and the root. You have the 2nd degree of the scale and the 4th degree. You have that distance between the 3rd and the 5th, the 5th and the flat 7th, and then we're back to the 6th to the root up the octave. So what we're going to do is take that piece wherever we like the sound of it, basically, and we're going to connect it to the dominant bebop scale. So we're going to take the chromatic approach and then just kind of chain it into the dominant bebop scale from there. And then eventually what we want to be able to do is lead into this new piece of information, so this chromatic approach using bebop scale lines or bebop scale vocabulary. Playing the dominant bebop scale after that first approach in its original transposition would sound like this. So I just approached the root, and then I went down the scale. There's the passing tone, and then down the scale to the flat 7th. I do the same thing on all of the other scale degrees that I mentioned. So the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 5th, it would sound like this. So notice when I do the 2nd to the 4th, I land on the 4th on a strong beat. I resolve it to the 3rd on the next strong beat, and then I just go down the scale from there. Same thing with the 3rd to the 5th, and then the 5th to the flat 7th. And then what we can do from there is try to lead into the chromatic approach using the bebop scale. So maybe I'll pick kind of a random starting point and try to lead into the approach from the 6th to the root. So I started the scale from the 3rd. I enclose the 6th to put it on a strong beat, and then I go and use the chromatic approach from the 6th to the root, and then down the scale to the 3rd. So our second piece of this longer phrase that we're going to take a look at is going to be this. So we have the notes here, F, A, C, E. If you spell those in order, it'd be an F major 7 arpeggio. You may be familiar with this concept if you studied bebop quite a bit already. This is called a pivot arpeggio. So a pivot arpeggio is when you take a 4-note arpeggio and you drop the top 3 notes down 1 octave. So we can apply that to any arpeggio that we want. So we'll just start with the arpeggios within the dominant bebop scale. So G7, B minor 7 flat 5, D minor 7, and F major 7. And we'll apply that pivot arpeggio to all of those. So G7, B minor 7 flat 5, D minor 7, and F major 7. And then we'll also create bebop scale lines with all of those. So I'll use the G7 pivot arpeggio and then go down the bebop scale from there. Same thing with B minor 7 flat 5, D minor 7, and F major 7. In the second measure, we just kind of have the bebop scale descending until we get to the last beat, and then we have an idea that goes over the bar line. So the second measure sounded like this one more time. So what we do going into the third measure is we have this idea starting on F. So this is again F major 7 arpeggio, but just with a chromatic approach before the second note and the remaining 3 notes as an 8th note triplet. So F major 7, add a G sharp before the A, and then A, C, and E as an 8th note triplet. So with that arpeggio variation, you can again apply that to all of the other arpeggios, create bebop scale lines with it. So I can do G7, B minor 7 flat 5, D minor 7, and F major 7. And I could also do bebop scale lines after all of those arpeggios. Also do bebop scale lines leading into those arpeggios. So maybe leading into the 3rd degree. So I descended the scale from the 3rd, went down to that B minor 7 flat 5, did the arpeggio with the rhythmic variation, and then continued down the scale from there. So our third piece is going to be in our last measure of the phrase, and it's just going to be this idea. And you may know this as a 5-3-2-1 melodic cell. And that's just a fancy way of saying that if we assume that D is like the root of this chord that we're superimposing on top of G7, so say D minor on top of G7, D would be 1, E would be 2, F would be 3, or flat 3 more specifically, and then A would be 5, so we played it descending as 5-3-2-1. So you can play these melodic cell figures all throughout the major scale, or all throughout G Mixolydian, or kind of however you want to think about it. And if you do that, transpose through the scale starting from C, the parent scale would sound like this. So for me, I don't really like the sound of all of those against a G7. So I like to play the cell off of the root of G7, off of the 4th. So thinking of like C against that G7. I like to play it off the 5th as well, and off the flat 7. So that gives you like the superimposed chords of, aside from G, you have C, D minor, and F major. So we can again play bebop scale lines that use all of those ideas. So if I did the G melodic cell descend, or D minor melodic cell descending. So I landed on the 4th there, resulted to the 3rd, and went down the scale. So you're kind of getting the idea. Basically, we're enclosing these melodic shapes, whatever they may be, whether they're arpeggios, melodic cells, chromatic approaches, we're enclosing them with bebop scale melodic vocabulary, which is something that's kind of more familiar to our playing already. You can do this with any new concept that you're trying to get into your playing. I'd recommend, if you have a new thing that you're trying to get into your playing, just try to enclose it with old stuff. So that could be improvisation, could be vocabulary that you already feel like you have internalized, could be bebop scale language, etc. So what I'm going to do now is just over a static G7, I'm going to try to mix and match a lot of these melodic concepts and see what happens. So, you get out these concepts under your fingers and into your ears, and you can kind of just mix and match them however you see fit when you're in the moment. So if you like this kind of video, I also have on my website a subscription-based service called Shed with Cecil, where basically every month we tackle a different topic. This past month we tackled the blues. This coming month we're going to be tackling the playing of Pat Martino. And basically each week you get access to lesson videos and PDFs, and there's also an interactive forum where you can ask me questions and interact with other members. So the link to that is in the description below, and feel free to check out the rest of my channel too if you like this video. Hope to see you next time.